the state of Israel has carried out at least about 2 rounds of airstrikes on Gaza, and it claims that it is targeting Hamas militants following waves of rocket launches that took place towards the southern part of Israel earlier. At this point of time, in the last 24-48 hours, the death toll because of this violence is said to be at least 10 people who've been killed in the Israeli raids into the occupied Palestinian enclave of Jenin. Now remember, after these Israeli raids were carried out into Jenin, there were reports of rockets fired from Gaza, which were intercepted by the Israeli air defense system. The tensions are on the high in the occupied Palestinian lands ever since the state of Israel has been carrying out repeated raids. Now remember, what has happened in the last 24 hours has been dubbed as arguably one of the deadliest days in this conflict in recent times. At least 9 Palestinians, including an elderly woman, have been killed during these raids by the Israelis. Now, earlier, the Palestinian Authority had announced the end of security coordination with the State of Israel in response to the Israeli killings in Jenin. The decision, of course, came after an emergency meeting of the Palestine Liberation Organization's Executive Committee, the Fatah Central Committee, and also the Palestinian government. Now, the Israeli military claims that it had sent in its special forces into the Palestinian-occupied territory of Jenin to detain members of a group called Islamic Jihad. The group is suspected of having carried out and also of having planned multiple major terror attacks. The security coordination between the State of Israel and the Palestinian Authority was brought on by the Oslo Accords that was signed between the State of Israel and the PLO in the early 1990s. And these have now, the Palestinians say that they would walk away from it in the aftermath of the violence that has happened in the last 48-72 hours. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is now leading one of the most far-right coalition governments in the State of Israel, has said that Israel is not looking to escalate this situation, though he's ordered the security forces to be on high alert in different sectors. Now, Thursday's Israeli raid into the Palestinian lands is said to be the deadliest single operation in the territory in at least about 2 decades. This at a time when there is no formal conflict that is taking place between Israel and Palestine. The fighting, of course, comes weeks into the Israeli new government, its most right-wing ever, which has pledged to take a pretty hard line against the Palestinians and also to ramp up settlement construction on lands that Palestinians say is crucial for their state. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, at least about 30 Palestinians, including gunmen and civilians, have been killed by the Israeli forces in West Bank since the beginning of this year. The fresh flare-up is expected to cast a shadow on the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The U.S. Secretary of State is visiting the State of Israel and West Bank next week amidst the spiraling violence that is presently underway in the Holy Lands. The Blinken's visit will be his first one since Netanyahu's far right-wing government has come to power in the State of Israel after the elections of November.
We recognize the very real security challenges facing Israel and the Palestinian Authority and condemn terrorist groups planning and carrying out attacks against innocent civilians. We also regret the loss of innocent lives and injuries to civilians and are deeply concerned by the escalating cycle of violence in the West Bank. I want to underscore the urgent need for all parties to de-escalate, to prevent further loss of civilian life, and to work together to improve the security situation in the West Bank.
All right, now to give us more insights in terms of what's exactly happening between Israel and Palestine at this moment, we're being joined by Raymond Vickery from Washington, D.C. He's a senior associate at the CSIS. Now, Mr. Vickery, I want to start off by asking you about this latest flare-up of violence. What has been witnessed in the last 48 hours has been described as the deadliest day of violence in almost about 2 decades. What do you think is happening at this moment then?
Well, thanks for having me. This is very serious indeed, and the United States is taking it very seriously. As you said, Secretary of State Tony Blinken is headed out there this weekend and will be meeting with both Israeli and Palestinian officials. Unfortunately, what has happened here is just a continuation of what's been going on really since 1947. The parties need to be able to get together. The last thing in the world that we need at this point after Russia's invasion of Ukraine is another widespread and shooting war. So it's very serious, but it has been exacerbated, it seems to me, by what has happened with the right-wing government which has come to power in Israel, which wants to extend settlements in the West Bank, does not view, at least some of the members do not view democratic norms as applicable to the Palestinians and to the solution of this problem. So we're hopeful that with Tony coming out there, going to Egypt as well as to Israel and into the West Bank, that we can calm down all sides.
All right, that of course would be the expectation. That is what one hopes Anthony Blinken would of course do. But as you pointed out, the fact that there is now a far right-wing government in Israel, and it has made it abundantly clear that it would want to increase these Israeli settlements that are viewed by the international community as clearly illegal and being built on Palestinian lands. This, of course, could result in more violence. Do you think the United States, under Joe Biden, would be willing to support the state of Israel in building more of these illegal settlements on Palestinian lands?
No, I don't think so. I think that these settlements, creeping annexation, is clearly not the way to go. The United States is still committed to a two-state solution, which has as its foundation respect for territorial integrity in both areas. So I think that what is going to be needed to happen here is to talk to the more reasonable members of the Netanyahu coalition, and particularly Netanyahu himself, who is a pragmatist, if nothing else. The problem is, of course, that he needed to be able to bring in some of these firebrands who really are on the fringes of, or have been on the fringes of, Israeli politics, and that has exacerbated the situation.
Now, my final question to you, Mr. Vickery, is this. Now, the United States talks about a two-state solution, but the fact of the matter is, with the creeping illegal settlements that the Israelis have been building on Palestinian lands, a lot of the land within Palestine has been reduced very much to enclaves. Do you think a two-state solution is even a viable thing to discuss at this moment?
Well, I think it has to be. I don't see there being within the state of Israel the incorporation with democratic rights of Palestinians, particularly with this coalition. I do think that there has to be some reining in of this settlement activity that you're talking about, which has not been countenanced. But basically what has to happen now is that instead of pulling back from each other, the saner heads in both sides, both the Palestinian Authority and Israeli government, are going to have to re-engage, and they're going to have to be able to deal with these problems rather than resorting to violence.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Raymond Vickery, for joining us from Washington, D.C. and getting us all those insights there.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.